Welcome to Tamara, Leigh, Trend On. Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by the Link Local Network out of Chicago. Find us at newlinklocalnetwork.com. And our other sponsors, Vandatech and Mediavine Marketing, simplifying social media, and IM Marketing, integrated mobile marketing, engaging your customers and clients on their mobile devices. All of this information can be found on tamaraleehlc.com. And today we would like to thank you for joining us on Trend On. Our guest is author of the Giant Cheesehead book, Jim Rice. Thank you for joining us, Jim.
Good morning.
Glad to have you back. I would also like to thank our location host for our Trend On show today. It's Leigh Hudson. The future of work is here, creating innovative space for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And we're fortunate to be in their beautiful, newly opened location down in the 3rd Ward of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So thank you for coming down. Jim and I first met at the summer before the season started, and we were at a festival downtown Seaburg, and you were walking around. You had just finished your book,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And just walking around with this cheesehead sandwich board. It's like cheese on your sandwich.
Right.
And so you were causing quite a stir, and I'm like, hey, what's up with the Giant Cheesehead?
Who is that guy?
Yeah, what is your story? We need to talk.
Well, it's always good to walk around in festivals in Wisconsin. Everybody's, up for a good laugh. Had that little sandwich board on, telling them about my book and trying to spread the word a little bit locally. And then we met, and it's been nice to continue the relationship.
What was the history? How did this book come about for you?
Well, I'm originally from New York. I have my little New York hat, and then
Is that vintage?
It's the old John Lennon.
Is that my way of saying,
kind of
are you old?
Yeah, really. It's old. It's new vintage.
New vintage. Okay.
But that's where I'm from. I came out here to college, so I became a cheesehead.
Oh, I like
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, Cheesehead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I became a cheesehead, but I'm still a Giant fan. I'll always be a New York football Giant fan.
Yeah.
But now I'm much more of a Packer fan.
There you go.
So that's my history. And my uncle, as I mentioned briefly in the book, my uncle was very convinced that the Packers would beat the Giants, and I just couldn't get my 8-year-old head around that. I was just like, how could a team from Green Bay beat the
Where
team
is
from New
Green
York? Yeah,
Bay?
right, exactly.
What?
Yeah, didn't even know where it was, and sure enough, they not only beat us being the Giants at the time, but they dominated. They shut us out in '61, and in '62, the only score the Giants got was on a block punt. So the Packers kept the Giants out of the end zone offensively 2 championship games in a row. But, that's kind of how it started, and now I'm a Wisconsinite who still loves New York, and now brought them together a little bit in this book.
And what? So did you always kind of have that in the back of your mind, or was it like one day an inspiration of like, I could do something with that?
Well, I never knew I could really do anything with it, but it was kind of a one-day kind of thing that hit me. When the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010, there were 3 people on that team that were from the Giants. So when I looked at that, I began to think back about, we all know about Lombardi and all of those great connections with New York there. But I thought, well, I wonder if anything even happened before that. And so I went back to the 20s and worked my way through all the way up to the Giants' victory over us last year, and studied the history and the connections between the teams, trades, rivalry issues, all the great games, and that's kind of how it came about.
So the book is written in sort of a chronological history of the Packers. Why don't you start by first telling us a little bit about the players and the relationship between the Giants and the Packers?
And of course, we know the Lombardi era group that came to Green Bay.
And what players are?
Well, you've got great ones like Don Chandler, Chuck Mersine, Emlyn Tinnell, and not only players, but other coaches from New York, Bill Austin and Ray Whiteteca and Bob Schnelker. And so the Lombardi era, a lot of people knew about. So then I thought, well, what went on before then? And so I went back to 1928.
I was going to say, you really went back to the beginning of the game in the NFL and the history of each of the teams.
Right, and the Giants and the Bears and the Packers and the Cardinals are really the 4 franchises that have survived the beginning of the NFL. And so there's a lot of history between these two teams. So before Lombardi, I mean, you go way back to the very first New York Giant championship team, and a guy on the team was named Cal Hubbard, great player, requested a trade to Green Bay because he had come out here to play against the Packers, thought, I love the rural nature in the small town versus the big city. They traded him to the Packers. He became just an outstanding football player in the Football Hall of Fame, part of the Packers' first three-peat in the 20s and 30s when they won 3 championships in a row, and then got into Major League Baseball as an umpire, and to this day he's the only person inducted in both the Football and the Baseball Hall of Fame. So that was kind of the first guy that I caught way back. And then, of course, there's Clark Hinkle, who the Giants wanted to play for them, but the Packers recruited him right out from under the Giants. In fact, at Yankee Stadium, when Hinkle was visiting the Giants, he sauntered over to the Packers side of the field and liked the Packers better, and the Packers stole him away.
Which team do I want to play? Let me go hang out with both.
Yes, and he was very highly recruited. And the Packers kind of won that little recruiting battle. He's a Hall of Famer too, and just a great Packer. And people were hesitant to come out to Green Bay.
Well,
way back then, it was hard.
What is Green Bay? Yeah, where is it?
It was hard to get to. It was small, so not as many people watching the games. There was concern about revenue, but the Giants, in fact, their owner at the time, Tamara, and George Halas, the owner of the Bears, were very supportive in helping to keep the franchise in Green Bay because there was a lot of pressure to move it to Milwaukee, where there was a bigger population center.
So what would you say of all the players in that history, that rivalry, what would have been some of the key players that really made a difference for either team?
Probably Don Chandler is probably the name that comes to mind for me. Chandler was probably the greatest trade Vince Lombardi ever made. Lombardi needed a kicker. Chandler wasn't real sure about how long he wanted to stay with the Giants, and he was almost looking to be a part-time kicker in football. Well, the Giants wouldn't have any of that, and the Packers wouldn't have any of it either. But Chandler did come out to Green Bay, and he played 3 years for the Packers, from 65 through 67. Single-handedly won the 1965 championship for the Packers. And then the Packers moved on to play Jim Brown and the Cleveland Browns, and that was their first of their 3 consecutive championships in the late 60s. And Chandler was the high scorer in that Cleveland Brown game for the championship too, with extra points and field goals. So I would say he's probably the most important.
From that era?
From the Lombardi era.
Okay, so in recent era, what would you say?
Well, recently
has there been?
It's been a little scarce. When the Packers started getting better with Favre and some of the other guys, the only Giant Cheesehead in that era was Frank Winters, the center, who we fondly call Frankie Bag of Donuts Winters. And he was part of the Three Amigos with Favre and Mark Chimura. But Frank Winters had played for the Giants before he came out here.
How significant then is the coaching? Because that's really the big history of rivalry.
Well, everybody knows about Lombardi, and Lombardi brought with him several people that he was connected with in New York. What most people don't know about are 3 other guys who are not officially Giant Cheeseheads because they didn't have a super positive effect on Green Bay. But Lindy Infante, who helped the Packers begin to come back in the late 80s with Don Mikowski and the teams back then, he had been an assistant with the New York Giants before he came here. The other person that went the other way, so he doesn't qualify as a Giant Cheesehead necessarily, is the current coach of the Giants, Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin used to coach as an assistant in Green Bay in the 80s, and now he is a Hall of Fame head coach for the Giants. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's an excellent man, a great community person. And so he got a little bit of a start in Green Bay. So it kind of works a little bit for the Giants too, but not as well as it's worked for the Packers.
The other way around. Okay, so Jim, I remember on our radio show you talked about the history of the coaches, and that really it changed with Lombardi coming to the Packers and the relationship that he had in New York with some coaching staff there, that it really ended up changing the way coaches were running their defenses and offense, because each of the coaches knew things about the other.
Right.
So tell us more about that.
Well, a little bit of the coaching history has to do with Lombardi and Tom Landry when they coached for the Giants as assistants. Lombardi was the offensive assistant, Landry was the defensive assistant. And they were both assistant coaches ahead of their time at that time. They were the first really to study game film intently. But when Lombardi came out here, then he brought his offensive philosophy from the Giants to Green Bay, had a better set of players to put that offense to work, and they were very successful. But he also brought Emlyn Tunnell, a great defensive back for the Giants, with him that first year, so he could incorporate Tom Landry's 4-3 defense, which was relatively new at the time, into Green Bay's defensive system, which was very successful because they won twice in the early 60s, and we know later on that they won even more.
So where are we looking at now in terms of recent history, the coaches?
Well, Jimmy Robinson is the most recent one.
Okay.
And he came with McCarthy in 06 on his staff. He left New York, came out here with McCarthy, and he was the great coach of that Super Bowl receiving corps of Donald Driver and Jennings, and all of those folks that are in some ways still on the team.
So it's all adding up to a interesting game coming up next week.
We hope. It's the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and it should be a nice way to end the Thanksgiving weekend if the Packers win.
And one thing I know you've said with the publishing of your book, that's been a surprise to you of how many women are actually engaged in the whole Packer Cheesehead phenomenon.
Yeah, it's incredible. On my Facebook page, I have about 600 people following me and are friends of the page, and close to half of them are women, which really surprised me. I mean, I know there's a lot of great, females that love football, but I didn't realize how many there were. It really shows the wide appeal of the Packers beyond that typical male, base, and the Packer female fans are probably the most loyal.
And maybe the most vocal.
Yeah, it could be the most vocal. Some look like Deanna Favre, others don't. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are women that are following this website and the Facebook page. And so it's been really surprising and rewarding in that way.
But yeah, it's definitely going to change, and very much an equal opportunity fan base. So, and my kids out in Portland, they found Packer Bar, and I know worldwide you said your book has received attention.
Yes, on Facebook I've got friends from the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, from Israel, from parts of Europe, towns and places I've never heard of. So that's also been an unexpected pleasure.
Yeah. And you have is it called the Giant Cheesehead Facebook page?
Yes, it's Giant Cheeseheads, facebook.com/Giant Cheeseheads, all one word. And the website is giantcheeseheads.com. That'll give you a little flavor to what's all in the book.
I like that, Cheeseheads and flavor.
Yeah, Cheeseheads and flavor. But I do have a poem.
I was going to say that was my nice segue into a modern day version
there
of
you
an
go.
ode.
Well, I'm a retired school administrator, and I have a lot of time on my hands. And so writing this book and researching it was a lot of fun. But then when it was over, I thought, well, I got to do something with it, just not publish it. So I decided to try some poetry. So this has a number of the players and coaches and a number of the rivalry games. And so if I could read this to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Audience,
I thought maybe you were going to wrap it out or something.
No, I'm not going to wrap it. I'm too old for that, and I don't want to make a complete fool out of myself.
Oh, come on.
One way you can learn quickly about what this is all about is through this poem that I wrote. So,
okay, all the highlights in one little
yes, let me share it with you, and we'll see how it goes. We're the Giant Cheeseheads, and we know just what to do. We don't care if the cheese is green or if it's blue. We pull for both teams, amazed by what they do. Between them, they have been in more title games than any other two. It started with Big Cal Hubbard, one of the greats of his day, who wandered out of New York to play in Green Bay. He made it to Canton and Cooperstown too, and to this very day, he's the only one in both of the two. And soon followed Hinkle, and you know what they say, he spurned the Giants' offer to play in Green Bay. He set many records on both sides of the ball, and his battles with Nagurski were legendary brawls. In 38 and 39, the great Danowski showed the way. He led the Giants in a title game split with Green Bay. His long pass to Soar clinched the Giants' 38 win, but in 1939, the Packers came roaring back again. When Smith took off after a dust-up with Lambeau, he went to the Giants where he took quite a gamble. He brought back Arnie Herber for a quarterback encore, but in 44, it was Fritsch, not Herber, who settled the score. And then there's Lombardi, who won much more often, by bringing in Chandler, Racine, and Bill Austin. They smacked down his old Giants in 1961 by pitching an overwhelming shutout when it was all said and done. The next year, the Giants were eager for revenge, and they welcomed the Packers to Yankee Stadium's den. But with Big and Mean Hitchkey keeping YA at bay, the wind blew another title all the way to Green Bay. The Green and Gold wins again in 1965, and the Packer dynasty is still alive. And Wood's interception changed Super Bowl I's direction, and the cheers for a three-peat began to thrive. In Super Bowl II, Chandler kicked his toe blue, and the Raiders left Miami downtrodden. 3 in a row for Green Bay, the fans would say, and their dominance of the league would never be forgotten. But in frigid '07 and then again in 2011, the Giants beat the Packers at Lambeau. Favre threw it up and Manning threw a beauty, and the Giants went on in the Super Bowls to do their patriotic duty.
And that little plug there at the end with the Patriots.
Yeah, a little jab at
That's
New
still
England
kind
there.
of raw and painful for all of us Packer fans.
Yeah. So that was a way to sum up some of what's in the book.
Yeah, you hit on the names and the dates and the big wins and the Super Bowls, and very
the
clever,
book,
very fun.
The book has a lot more than that, of course, and it's got, every player that ever played for, either the Giants or the Packers. So I've got them, not only the ones that came this way, but also the ones that went from Green Bay to New York, and you'll see that the Packers got quite the better end of most of those transactions.
Yeah,
and then there's also the list of every game that was played, including the championship games, and then the resources that I used to create.
of course, as a good educator, you cited your sources.
That's right. Good bibliography. All the quotes are certainly attributed
MLA
to the
format.
right, to the correct sources. So,
Yeah.
great Christmas gift for people looking for an inexpensive gift for Packer fans. They'll love it.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And again, if anyone is looking for that information, they can find it on the Giant Cheesehead.
There you go. GiantCheeseheads.com, as well as Facebook /Giant Cheeseheads. And Amazon.com has the book, as well as CreateSpace.com has it as well. So it's readily available. $6.99. It's a good deal.
It's a very good deal, and you can't go wrong ever with Packer.
Right.
So, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Friend Don. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun,
Good
and
seeing you
we'll
again.
see how the outcome comes out next week.
Hopefully, we got a great Thanksgiving weekend.
And the playoffs.
Right.
It would be wonderful to see a playoff rematch and only have the Packers come out ahead.
That's right. We'd have to turn the tide a little bit.
Looking forward to it. I wish you much success with you
Well,
both.
thank you. We'll see how it goes, and maybe
All
we'll
right.
connect if they
Absolutely.
get in the playoffs.
I get it. So thank you for joining us. I'm Tamara Leigh, Trend On. You can find us again at Tamara Leigh